and I used to think love was about patience, about holding on through every rough patch because one day it would all make sense. But the truth is, sometimes patience just keeps you stuck in a place you were never meant to stay. When I met Lucas, he was all charm and confidence, the kind of man who seemed born under better lighting, always smiling, always surrounded by people who wanted to be near him. He worked in marketing back then, but he talked more about vision and energy than actual goals. I found it refreshing, even a little inspiring. He made me laugh, made me feel seen in a way that quiet people like me rarely do. I've always been the calm one, the listener, the observer, the steady hand in every storm. Lucas said he loved that about me. You balance me, he used to say, tracing his fingers across my wrists like I was something delicate he could break if he wanted to. I mistook that for tenderness. When we moved in together, I thought it was the next step in a growing partnership. He had just quit his job to find his purpose, and I didn't mind supporting us for a while. I make decent money as a UX designer, and I believed in him. He said he needed space to dream to plan something bigger. I told myself love means giving your partner time. The months went by. He still hadn't found another job, but he always had time for gym sessions, rooftop brunches, and photo shoots for his Instagram. Every day he'd post quotes about ambition and independence while I quietly paid the rent, the bills, and the groceries he forgot to pick up. At first, I brushed it off. He's figuring things out, I'd tell my best friend Tabitha when she raised an eyebrow at his spending habits. He just needs encouragement. She never said it outright, but I could see the concern in her eyes, the way she hesitated before changing the subject. It wasn't all bad, though. There were nights when he'd hold me and talk about wanting a family, a house by the lake, a dog named Milo. He'd make me laugh until I forgot how tired I was. Those moments felt real, the kind that convince you love is worth the hard parts. But the hard parts were becoming the pattern, beneath the surface. You're too quiet, he'd tease when I didn't have much to say at a dinner party. You should be more spontaneous. Or, you're lucky I'm patient with your overthinking. When I'd come home from long hours at work exhausted, he'd scoff and say, "You're too young to act like you hate your life already." If I asked him to help with dishes or laundry, he'd roll his eyes. God, Laura, you sound like someone's mom. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. The slow erosion of respect disguised as humor. The more he belittled me, the harder I tried to be the understanding girlfriend. I thought if I showed him enough love, he'd remember the version of me he once admired. But love doesn't fix contempt, it just delays the fallout. One afternoon, I came home early from work and heard laughter coming from the bedroom. Not his usual deep laugh, it was softer, flirtier. When I peeked in, he was on FaceTime with someone. A woman's voice said, "You're impossible," he smirked, replying, "You love it." When he noticed me standing there, he smiled too easily. "Oh, hey, that was just Sophie. She used to work with me. Relax." Sophie. I recognized the name, his ex-girlfriend. My chest tightened, but I didn't confront him. I told myself I trusted him. I wanted to be above jealousy. He leaned in to kiss my forehead, whispering, "You're not one of those insecure girls, right?" I laughed it off, pretending I wasn't dying inside. The next few weeks, things only grew stranger. He became secretive with his phone, angrier when I asked simple questions. He'd tell me he was meeting old colleagues or potential investors, but his calendar was empty when I passed his desk. Still, I told myself it was just a phase. We'd get through it. Love was supposed to be work, wasn't it? Then one night we were out with friends, and he made a joke one that landed like a knife. Someone asked if we'd ever get married, and Lucas laughed. Let's be honest, I'm not sure Laura's the marrying type. She's comfortable, safe, reliable. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, the kind of laugh that hides a bruise. On the way home, he acted like nothing happened. He talked about a new gym he wanted to join, how his ex had messaged him about networking opportunities. I stared out the car window, pretending not to care. When we got home, he kissed my cheek absently and said, "You should really smile more. You look too serious lately. I miss the old you." That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to him snore softly, and felt something inside me start to fade. I wasn't angry, just hollow. I thought about the version of myself I used to be: optimistic, kind, eager to believe in people. Somewhere between his half-truths and careless jokes, that version had started to disappear. The next morning, I decided to try one last time. Maybe a quiet dinner would remind him of what we had. His favorite sushi candles, the playlist he used to hum along to. I wanted to believe we could find our way back. I texted him before I left the office. Don't eat. I'm bringing dinner. No reply. I figured he was busy or napping. I picked up the order anyway, 2 rolls edamame and the miso soup he always said reminded him of college. When I reached the apartment, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The second thing, a pair of unfamiliar heels by the door. For a second, my brain searched for harmless explanations. Maybe a friend, maybe a neighbor stopping by. But then I heard it laughter low and intimate from the bedroom. Something in me went very still. I didn't storm down the hall. I didn't shout his name. I just stood there holding the bag of sushi and listened. A man's voice would have made me angry, but this a woman's laugh, that light smug kind of laugh, made me feel something colder. When the bedroom door opened, he stepped out first, shirtless hair, damp from a shower. Then her, Sophie, wearing my robe. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Lucas smiled, almost lazy. Oh, you're home early. She tilted her head, smirking. This is awkward. Or maybe not. You should really thank him for staying with you as long as he did. I didn't move, didn't cry, just watched her, then him. And for the first time, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt clarity. I set the takeout bag gently on the counter and pulled the spare key from my pocket, the one he used when he forgot his. I placed it next to the sushi. You already left, Lucas, I said quietly. I'm just catching up. Then I walked out the door without another word. Outside, the air felt different, sharp, clean, like I'd been underwater for years and finally broke the surface. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel love. I didn't even feel pain. I just felt free. I didn't go far that night. Just walked until my legs started to ache and the city lights blurred into streaks of gold. My phone buzzed in my pocket again and again, Lucas calling, then texting. Laura, come back. You're overreacting. It's not what you think. We need to talk like adults. Each message made me walk faster. By the time I reached Tabitha's apartment, I was shaking not from anger, but from the strange calm that had settled over me. She opened the door before I even knocked twice. Laura. Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to cut through the fog in my head. I didn't say anything. I just held up the sushi bag cold by now and whispered, dinner's on me. She didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside, sat me on the couch, and turned on some old comfort show we used to watch in college. I think it was Gilmore Girls. The noise helped. The normalcy helped. We didn't talk about him that night. I slept on her couch and woke up to sunlight spilling through the blinds. The world was still turning somehow. That was the hardest part, realizing life doesn't pause for heartbreak. I didn't cry the next morning either. I made coffee, scrolled through my emails, and even sent a few work replies. It was like I'd switched to autopilot. The emotions were still there, I knew they were, but buried under layers of disbelief and exhaustion. Tabitha watched me quietly. You don't have to be strong right now, she said. I'm not, I replied. I'm just done. 2 days later, I went back to the apartment to grab my things. I half expected him to be gone, or maybe to find my clothes in garbage bags on the floor, but the place was spotless, too spotless. The faint smell of his cologne hung in the air, mixed with cheap air freshener. On the counter, there was a note in his handwriting. We both said things we didn't mean. Come home. Let's talk. I stared at the words for a long time before crumpling the note and dropping it into the trash. I took my laptop, my plants, and the photo of us at the beach, the one where we looked happy before all the cracks started to show. Then I left the keys on the table. For the first few nights at Tabitha's, silence became my enemy. It filled every room, pressing against my chest like a weight. I tried music, TV, anything to drown it out. But when everything went quiet, his voice crept back in the little digs, the subtle insults, the way he'd say my name when he was bored or irritated. I realized I'd been living inside that tone for 2 years. By the end of the week, I started running again, something I hadn't done since before Lucas. It hurt at first. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but with every step I could feel parts of him peeling off me like dead skin I'd been carrying too long. Then a few days later, I saw her. Scrolling through Instagram, one of our mutual friends had posted a story. Sophie smiling on my couch, holding a wine glass captioned, clearing the energy in my space. I stared at the photo, frozen. My couch, my throw pillows, my space. It was almost funny how predictable it was. The woman who mocked me for working too much was now pretending she'd earned the— I just blocked her. Then him. Then deleted their pictures, their messages, their ghost. For a few days I felt better, lighter. I went to work, cooked dinner with Tabitha, even laughed again. I thought maybe, just maybe, that was it. But closure never comes that easily. A week later, Jenna, one of our mutual acquaintances, texted me out of nowhere. Hey, you probably don't want to see this, but I figured you should know. Attached were screenshots from a group chat. Sophie had been bragging. Yeah, I slept with her boyfriend. Big deal. He was boring anyway. I just wanted to see if I could still get him. She acted like some perfect girlfriend, but he was dying inside with her. Each message hit like a slap, but the last one made me pause. Honestly, I stayed longer than I planned. Rent free, and his card always worked. Win win. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Sophie hadn't stolen Lucas, she'd just taken her turn using him. I texted Jenna a quick thanks and promised I was fine. But that night, lying awake, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. How long had I confused comfort for love? How many times had I mistaken his need for control as proof of affection? I thought I was the lucky one that I had someone charismatic, confident, magnetic. But in reality, I'd been a supporting character in a story that only existed for his ego. And now the spotlight had turned on him and it was starting to burn. A few days later, Tabitha came home grinning like she'd just won a bet. You're not going to believe this, she said, tossing her bag onto the couch. What, Lucas? Sophie dumped him. Apparently, the dream girl moved on already, blocked him, deleted everything. He's been posting breakup quotes like a teenager. I smiled without meaning to. Not because I wanted him to hurt, but because life has a strange way of evening the score when you finally stop playing. Guess karma's not subtle, I said quietly. Tabitha laughed. Nope, but it's thorough. That night, I sat by her balcony with a cup of tea and finally let myself breathe. The city hummed below distant sirens, laughter, the rhythm of life moving forward. I thought about the sushi still sitting in that apartment the night I left, about how it symbolized everything I'd been trying to serve to someone who never had an appetite for love that wasn't centered around him. For the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd been returned to myself. Still, a quiet part of me whispered, he's not done yet. Because men like Lucas never accept silence as closure. They always come back when the applause fades. It's strange how quiet freedom can feel at first. There's no music, no dramatic transformation, just the absence of chaos. 2 weeks had passed since I left Lucas. I hadn't blocked his number yet, mostly because I wanted to see if he'd even try. He didn't. Not at first. And that silence told me everything. He wasn't grieving. He wasn't heartbroken. He was just embarrassed that I'd walked away before he could. I started to rebuild my life piece by piece. I went back to my apartment complex, signed a new lease for a small studio a few blocks from work. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, the kind of place where I could actually hear my own thoughts. When I unpacked my boxes, I found one labeled Miscellaneous, full of small things that used to make me happy. My sketchbook, an old film camera, a candle that smelled like vanilla and salt water. All things I'd set aside because Lucas didn't like them. He said candles were a waste of money, and my sketching was too childish for a professional woman. So I stopped. That night I lit the candle anyway. The flame flickered soft and steady like a heartbeat I'd almost forgotten was mine. A few days later, I was scrolling through social media and nearly laughed out loud. Lucas had posted a photo shirtless in my old living room with a caption that read, New chapter, elevating my energy. Only real ones stay. The irony could have filled a library. Sophie was in the photo too, legs crossed, wine glass in hand, wearing one of my old blazers full of heart emojis and fake support. You two are perfect together. Power couple energy. I didn't react, just blocked them both. But deep down, a small bitter laugh escaped me. Perfect together. They were exactly alike. Two people performing happiness for the internet while privately draining everyone around them. A week passed. I started to sleep through the night again. Tabitha and I would cook dinner, watch bad movies, and laugh until our sides hurt. It felt good, like breathing in clean air after living in smoke. Then, one afternoon, I got a text from Jenna, the same mutual friend who'd sent me screenshots before. Hey, you might want to see this. Attached was a screenshot from a group chat, Sophie again. Can you believe Lucas actually thought I'd move in with him? He's cute but exhausting. All talk, no real ambition. Honestly, I only dated him to annoy his ex. Work though, she probably cried for weeks. Anyway, I'm over it. Time to level up. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. Then I laughed. Not the kind of bitter laugh that hides pain, a real laugh. Because karma hadn't just knocked on their door. It had unpacked its bags and moved in. Lucas, who once called me boring, was now being described as exhausting. The girl who mocked me for being safe had used him as a revenge prop and tossed him aside. Poetic, really. That same night, Tabitha walked into the living room with takeout and a grin. You look lighter, she said, handing me a spring roll. Maybe I am, I replied. Maybe I finally stopped trying to understand people who thrive on chaos. She nodded. You know he's going to reach out eventually, right? Of course, I said, smiling faintly, but I won't answer. 3 days later, my prediction came true. It started with a text from an unknown number. Hey, I know you probably hate me, but can we talk? I didn't reply. A day later, I owe you an apology. You didn't deserve how I handled things. Still nothing. Then a third message. I've been doing a lot of reflection. Sophie wasn't real. What we had was. That one made me pause, not because I believed it, but because I recognized the pattern. Lucas wasn't seeking forgiveness. He was seeking validation, the kind that used to keep him alive. I blocked the number. An hour later, another one appeared. Ignoring me won't fix what you broke between us. And that's when I realized something important. People like Lucas don't miss you, they miss control. Over the next week, the messages multiplied. Different numbers, burner accounts, even an old email I hadn't used in years. Each one was a new mask of the same desperation. I can't sleep. You're cruel. I just want closure. But closure isn't something you give someone who shattered your peace. It's something you claim quietly without permission. So I said nothing. And the more silent I became, the louder his panic grew. Then came the twist I didn't expect. One night, Tabitha came home with her phone in her hand and a frown on her face. Laura, she said slowly, you might want to hear this. She played a voice note someone had sent her. A mutual friend had recorded Lucas at a party. He was drunk, ranting loudly. She thinks she's better than me now, posting her little quotes and acting like she's healed. Please. She'll come crawling back. They always do. The background noise was full of laughter. No one believed him. When it ended, I just smiled. He's right about one thing, I said quietly. I did heal. 2 days later, Jenna texted again. Guess whose single Sophie dumped him and blocked him on everything? Apparently, she'd gone back to her ex, a musician with more followers. Lucas had been left to clean up the mess he helped create. He posted vague captions like, some people will use your heart as a stepping stone. Don't give your energy to the unworthy. I didn't even roll my eyes this time. It was over. For real this time. But karma wasn't done yet. That weekend, Lucas's sister Kelsey messaged me on Instagram. We'd never been close. She'd always treated me like a quiet inconvenience at family dinners. Her message read, hey, I don't want to get involved, but Lucas isn't doing great. He said you've been ignoring him, and honestly, that's kind of cold. At least give him closure. Closure. There it was again. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, she sent another one. He told our mom you ghosted him after he opened up about his mental health. I don't know what really happened, but that's low. I laughed out loud this time. The same man who once called me emotionally dull was now pretending he'd poured his soul out and I'd abandoned him for it. I showed the message to Tabitha, who snorted. He's rewriting history, she said. Let him, I replied. It's the only way he can survive his own reflection. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter from somewhere below, carefree, alive, distant. I realized something simple. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Because people like Lucas only understand noise, and nothing destroys their ego faster than being met with nothing at all. Still, a part of me knew this wasn't his last attempt. Lucas wasn't the kind of man to fade quietly. He'd find new ways to get my attention, to force his way back into the narrative. But this time, the story didn't belong to him. It was mine, and I wasn't handing it back. It started quietly, a text here, an email there, and then it began to snowball. One morning, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I know I've made mistakes. Can we meet for coffee? I just want to explain. I stared at it for a long minute before pressing block. By evening, there was another, I owe you closure. You owe me a chance to apologize. That word again. Closure. It had become his favorite weapon demand disguised as vulnerability. I didn't answer. 2 days later, a message slipped through on an old email account I hadn't checked in years. I'm not sleeping well. I replay everything we had. Sophie meant nothing. I was lost. You were the only one who ever really understood me. No apology, just excuses dressed as reflection. I deleted it. The next morning, a new email arrived. You made me feel invisible. You worked all the time. I just wanted to feel wanted. There it was, the shift from guilt to blame. He couldn't stand not being the victim, so he rewrote history. I closed the laptop and whispered to myself, you're not his mirror anymore. That weekend, Tabitha and I went to the farmer's market. The air smelled like oranges and coffee grounds. For the first time in months, I felt ordinary again, safe in the crowd. Until I heard my name. Laura. I turned. Lucas was there. Hair unkempt, eyes red, clothes too casual for the confidence he used to wear, like armor. He smiled hesitant, almost boyish. Wow, you look amazing. I stayed still. What do you want, Lucas? He rubbed the back of his neck, pretending to search for words. I didn't expect to run into you. I've been thinking about you a lot. I'm sure, I said. He laughed nervously. Look, I messed up. Sophie lied to me. She used me. That must have been hard, I said evenly. It was. I thought you'd at least care, after everything we had. I met his eyes. You said I should thank you for even staying with me. Consider this my thank you. His smile faltered. So that's it. You're just over it. I'm just done performing pain for you, I replied. Tabitha stepped beside me, protective, without a word. Lucas's expression shifted softness, replaced by anger. You've changed. I finally started listening to myself, I said. We walked away before he could answer. The sun was warm on my back, and for once I didn't look over my shoulder. A few days later, a letter appeared in my mailbox, handwritten in the same slanted scrawl I'd once loved. I miss the version of me I was when I was with you. Please don't remember me as the villain. I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it in the recycling bin. Some stories don't need a sequel, but Lucas wasn't finished. When silence failed, he switched tactics sympathy. A mutual friend texted me. He told us you abandoned him after he opened up about his depression. Everyone's worried. I almost laughed. The man who'd mocked therapy now claimed he'd bared his soul and I'd walked away. I didn't bother defending myself. Let him have his fiction. I was living reality. By the following week, the messages turned bitter again. You think you're better than me? You'll regret this when I move on. No one will love you the way I did. He was right about that no one would love me that way again. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the city breathe. Every honk, every laugh from the street below sounded like life-continuing proof that his chaos no longer reached me. The next morning, my inbox was empty. My phone was still. And in that stillness, I finally felt what peace really sounded like. But peace never lasts long when someone needs a new audience. A week later, Kelsey, his sister, messaged me on Instagram. Hey, I don't want to get in the middle, but Lucas said you've been ignoring him. He's not okay. At least give him some closure. I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, I sent, he's had plenty of words. I'm giving him silence. She read it and didn't reply. That evening, I met Caleb, a new colleague who'd joined our design team. He was quiet, observant, kind in that effortless way that doesn't need to announce itself. We talked about art travel and how small acts of consistency build trust faster than grand gestures. When he walked me to my car, I realized I hadn't thought about Lucas once during the conversation. That was my closure. Still, I knew the final chapter with Lucas was coming. Men like him don't fade, they unravel in public. And when that day arrived, I intended to watch it unfold with the same calm he once mocked me for. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I walked out of Lucas's apartment. 3 months of silence healing and rediscovering what peace actually felt like. I'd moved into a new place by then, bright, quiet, filled with sunlight instead of tension. The walls didn't echo with arguments or apologies that meant nothing. I worked during the day, read in the evening, sometimes met Caleb for dinner after work. He wasn't trying to fix me or fill a void. He just existed beside me, calm, warm, unhurried. The first time he laughed at one of my jokes, I realized I'd forgotten what genuine laughter sounded like. Life was soft again. Then Jenna texted, FYI, Lucas is going to be at Ryan's party this weekend. Thought you should know. Ryan was a mutual friend, the kind who threw those crowded birthday parties where everyone pretended to still like each other. I hadn't planned to go, but something in me shifted when I saw that text. Not revenge, not curiosity, just readiness. It was time for him to see what he lost, not because of who I was with, but because of who I'd become without him. The night of the party, I slipped on a simple black dress, nothing flashy, nothing loud. Caleb picked me up, smiling when he saw me. You look like peace personified, he said. I smiled back. That's exactly how I feel. The place was packed music, laughter, the hum of a dozen old stories being retold. As we walked in, I spotted familiar faces, friends who'd once avoided choosing sides now greeting me with warm smiles instead of awkward silence. And then I saw him. Lucas. He was standing by the bar, pretending to be engrossed in conversation, but the moment our eyes met, his expression faltered. The confidence I remembered. The posture, the charm, the control, it was gone. He looked smaller, like he'd been living in the shadow of his own mistakes. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I just smiled politely and turned back to Caleb, who was talking to a coworker. But Lucas couldn't let it go. Half an hour later, while I was at the drink table, he appeared beside me. Laura, he said softly. I turned. Lucas. He gave a weak smile. You look good. Thanks, I said, simply pouring myself a drink. He shifted his weight, searching for the old rhythm that used to keep me on edge. Is that your boyfriend? He asked, nodding toward Caleb. No, I said. Just someone who respects me. His jaw tensed. So that's it. You really moved on. I met his gaze, calm and steady. I didn't move on from you, Lucas. I moved on from who I had to be around you. For a second, he looked like he might cry or yell. I couldn't tell which. I was stupid, he said finally. I didn't realize what I had until I cut him off gently. You realized it when you lost control, not when you lost me. He blinked as if the words hit harder than he expected. I thought you'd always be there, he whispered. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I didn't think you'd actually give me a reason to. He let out a short, humorless laugh. You really think you're better off now, I tilted my head. I don't think about you enough to compare. For a moment, we just stood there, the music dulling the crowd, fading into a blur. It felt like standing in the ruins of a house I'd once tried to rebuild over and over until I finally walked away. Then his voice broke through the quiet. I hope he breaks your heart. I smiled, not cruelly, but with the kind of peace he'd never understand. He couldn't if he tried. And I walked away. Caleb was waiting near the patio holding 2 drinks. Everything okay? Better than okay, I said, taking one. He smiled, but his eyes studied me. That was him, wasn't it? It was, I admitted. And I said goodbye without saying it. We clinked glasses. Behind us, Lucas stood alone by the bar, staring into his drink, like it might offer him another version of the story, one where he still had control, where I hadn't slipped away quietly and rebuilt without him. But that version didn't exist anymore. Later that night, as Caleb and I left, I caught one last glimpse of Lucas in the reflection of the glass door, still standing there, surrounded by people, but entirely alone. I didn't feel anger or triumph or even pity, just nothing. And that nothing was everything I'd fought for. When I got home, I took off my heels, set my phone on the counter, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see the woman he tried to break, I saw the woman who refused to stay broken. The next morning, I woke to a final text from an unknown number. You really meant it, didn't you? You never looked back. I typed a single reply. There was nothing to look back at. Then I deleted his number for the last time. And that was it. No fireworks, no grand ending. Just silence, clean, calm, final. Sometimes closure doesn't arrive with tears or forgiveness. Sometimes it's just the sound of your own footsteps walking away, steady, unhurried, free. It's been 6 months since that night. 6 months since I walked out of that party and left Lucas standing under those dim lights surrounded by people who didn't really see him. I haven't heard from him since. Not a text, not an email, not even a passive-aggressive quote post like before. And maybe that's the real ending, the kind that doesn't need noise or confrontation. Just absence. In that silence, I rebuilt my life from the ground up. My new apartment is small, but it feels alive. There's sunlight spilling through the curtains every morning, plants thriving on the windowsill, and quiet music humming from the kitchen while I make coffee. I hung up a few photos, ones that represent who I am now, not who I was trying to be. My favorite sits on the bookshelf, a candid photo of me and Tabitha laughing with our heads thrown back, eyes crinkled completely unposed. It's the first photo of myself that doesn't feel like proof of survival, it just feels like living. Sometimes when I walk to work, I still pass the cafe where Lucas and I used to sit on Sunday mornings. The barista still recognizes me. She always gives me a knowing smile, like she's proud of me for something unspoken. I've seen Lucas once since the party across the street outside a bar. He didn't notice me. He looked thinner, quieter. His eyes were unfocused, like he was still searching for a mirror that could show him who he used to be. I didn't feel anything. Not pity, not resentment. Just neutrality, the kind that comes when your wounds finally scar over. My life has become slower, simpler. I started sketching again, the kind of quiet drawing I'd given up years ago because Lucas said it was childish. Last week, I submitted one of my designs for a gallery exhibit downtown. It got accepted. Caleb came with me to the opening. He stood beside me, hands tucked in his pockets, smiling softly as people admired my work. He didn't make the night about him. He didn't need to. Later, as we walked home under the city lights, he said, "You draw the world the way you wanted to see it, don't you?" I nodded. I guess I do. Softer, kinder, honest. He smiled. You know that's how you live now, too. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the skyline. The same city that once suffocated me now felt open, endless, forgiving. I thought about Lucas again, but only for a moment. I imagined him still chasing validation, still posting half-hearted affirmations about growth and energy. He always needed an audience. And maybe that's the saddest part when the spotlight fades. People like him don't know who they are anymore. I used to think silence was loneliness. Now I know it's freedom. Because silence means no arguments to win, no apologies to wait for, no attention to earn. Just stillness, and in that stillness, peace. As I finished my drink, my phone buzzed with a message from Caleb. Made it home safe. Thank you for letting me be part of your new chapter. I smiled. My reply was simple. You didn't become part of it, Caleb. You helped me start it. I don't check on Lucas anymore. I don't wonder who he's with or what he's doing. He once told me I should be grateful he even stayed with me. But now I know I should be grateful that he left. Because when he walked away, he took the noise with him. And in the quiet that followed, I finally heard myself again. Sometimes the best revenge isn't winning them back, it's forgetting they